Hey everybody, it's hwsteele, and in this video I'm going to start to explain to you the trend duration forecasting method that I had videos for posted online on YouTube years ago. I think I did those videos probably around 6 years ago now. So those videos I took down because they had very poor sound quality, and I took those down probably 3 years ago, something like that. I don't remember exactly. But I'm going to basically re-record them and give a kind of step-by-step progression of this methodology, because when I first started looking at it, obviously it was much more rudimentary and basic than it was as I developed it further and further and further. And what I'm going to show you today is the most basic form of it that I had basically started with way back when, probably maybe 8-10 years ago, something like that. And it quickly evolved into something that's significantly different now. And eventually, as I do more videos in this series, I'm going to show the evolution of it and how things have changed, and how it's what I'm showing you today is not what I actually use now when I use this methodology. I'll also say that it tends to work better on like commodities and individual stocks than it does for like the S&P 500 indexes, basically. So keep that in mind. So basically what it is an astrological method, or a method using the planets to determine when the trend has a likelihood of ending. Now, I actually had a mechanical method that I used, which was just where I plugged a few numbers in and then got turns from the market, but sometimes those numbers would fail. If we look at this chart, this is Apple, by the way. Let me move it down. See, Apple right there, daily chart, current as of right now, 2019. And it's what I'm going to use to show the beginning methods. I guess I'll probably stay with Apple for a while, and we'll look at different examples as things progress in the coming videos over the next few weeks or so, perhaps over a month or two. But anyway, so if you have a move like this, we have a fair amount of volatility where the market in 10 to 20 days or so changes trend enough where you can make significant money, especially if you're trading in options in something like this. But then you have things where it's more along this line right here, and here we just traded down for essentially a couple of months right here, or maybe we got a sideways move where it's like this and there's not much volatility really, and you're just kind of moving sideways for, again, several months right there. So the trend duration forecasting method is what I came up with way back when to try and figure out how long these abnormally, in quotes, long trends might be. Because when it's volatile like this, it's easy to forecast changes in trends. But then when you get into a more trending market where the reversals are very small, you kind of just want to go with the trend, but the question is, how long is that trend going to last? So this methodology I worked on to try and answer that question. Okay, so here's the basics of it, the very basics of it. When I first started it, what I would do is use Astrolog, and I would look for, and I'll just use as an example this most significant low point right here at the beginning of, let's see, February 9, 2018. So that's what I would do. I would go to that date in Astrolog, February 9, 2018. Then what I would do is look for a relationship between one of the 4 fast planets, which are Mercury, Venus, the Sun or Earth, and Mars. I'd look for a relationship between one of the 4 of them and then one of the 4 slow planets, which is Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, or Neptune. And then I would extrapolate from there. So as we can see right here, and I'll go ahead and take the lunar north node out, because I don't use that, or I should say that I didn't use that with this methodology to begin with, and that's what I'm showing you, the very beginnings of it. So what I notice right here is that the Sun and Jupiter are at a square from each other. Sun's at 321 and Jupiter's at 232, so they're actually within 1 degree of being square. And that's the strongest relationship right here. And I'm going to take the moon out also, help clean up the chart a little bit so it's easier to see. Okay, so the very basics, how I started this was, well, these two planets, the Sun and Jupiter, are in a relationship, so I would expect this trend to last until they are in a relationship again. And the most fundamental aspects are the conjunction, where their two planets are together, the opposition, where the 360 degrees of the wheel is divided by 2, the trine, where the 360 degrees of the wheel are divided by 3, and then the square, where the 360 degrees of the wheel are divided by 4. So those are the basics right there. A conjunction, an opposition, a trine, and a square. And other aspects are, how should I put it? They have less weight in this methodology, at least at this point of the creation of it. So anyway, we're looking right here. So the Sun is ahead of Jupiter, and the Sun is faster than Jupiter. So the next aspect that we could anticipate here is the Sun trine, or 120 degrees from Jupiter. So I advance the program until I see the Sun trine Jupiter. And that happens, let's see, 353. So that would be right here. So March 13th, 2018 is when I would anticipate there being some sort of change in trend. And if we look right here, we see that the actual high of that particular swing is in fact March 13th, 2018. So in this particular instance, it worked perfectly. So before you go jumping up and down thinking you found the Holy Grail, you have not, because it does not always work like that, okay? So the next thing I'm looking at here, we're at a high right here, right? Of course, we don't know for a fact that it's the high of this particular swing up until the point where we've moved down a few days. So maybe, 2, 3, 4 days at this point. Then you can say, okay, we have a decent swing right there. So let's go ahead and see what happens. So we look at the market, or I'm sorry, the program, astrolog program here, and we see what relationships. Of course, we have the trine between the Sun and Jupiter, which would be at this point my main focus because that's what worked previously. But we also have Venus and Mercury at a 90-degree relationship with Saturn, and Mars at a 120-degree relationship to Uranus. So what this does is make it as clear as mud, to use an expression that my grandfather did. So what's happening here is we actually have 3 or 4 relationships all at the same time. Now, this is actually fairly common here. And if we look at the market, we see we have a bottom here that lasts a while, another retracement there, and then a lower bottom there. So we might actually time this bottom or this bottom if we're being accurate. And there's always the possibility where it's not accurate. So what we're going to do is, let's go ahead and take, it's going to get a little bit confusing, so we're going to take our Neptune out of the picture for right now. We'll restrict Neptune since it's not showing us anything. And then we're going to watch Mercury and Venus in relationship to Saturn. We're going to watch Mars in relationship to Uranus, and the Sun in relationship to Jupiter. Remember, we're looking for conjunctions, oppositions, trines, or squares. So Mars is before Uranus and it's faster, so it's going to close in on Uranus. Mercury and Venus is faster than Saturn, so it's going to expand away from Saturn. And the Sun is going to expand away from Jupiter. So if we go forward, we see that Venus and Saturn form a relationship right here. That's the first next relationship that's formed. And that's April 8 approximately of 2018. And we see that April 8 is right here. So right at the end of this sideways move right there. So see, that's not as precise as we'd like it, which would indicate that the probability is we're going to continue to the downside in theory, right? So we continue and continue. And then we see Mercury back in a relationship with Saturn right there, in a square relationship around April 25, 2018. So if we look, we see April 25, there's the 24th, 25th right there like that. And in hindsight, it's easy to see that we've essentially found the bottom right there. We're a couple of days out from the absolute bottom, but we're within just a point or two of when it's actually going to be. So because we have four things going on, we don't know whether or not we're going to get the bottom right here, but this is one of the possibilities, and we did get the bottom on this second thing, which is Mercury coming back into a relationship with Saturn right there. So as the market moves up and then eventually makes a higher high right there, we anticipate that we're probably looking at the bottom right there. And that's essentially what this methodology is right here, is it just gave me possibilities of when the market would show the end of that particular trend. And when we have one thing going on, like we originally had the Sun and Jupiter going on, it gets pretty obvious and pretty easy. It's not always accurate, but it works a fair amount of the time actually. And it depends on certain markets. So if you have a market where this doesn't work in, it's probably not going to work very well. But if you find a market kind of like Apple where this does work fairly well, then you can expect to be able to rely on it decently. But you have incidents where things like 2 or 3 or 4 different relationships are happening all at the same time, so that just gives you possibilities to look for. And it's much less specific in those instances. So let's go ahead and look now. We know this is the big low right here, and that is April 27, 2018. So we're going to go ahead and move astrolog to the 27th and see what we see. We see two relationships here, which is the Sun at a trine with Saturn and Mercury at a square with Saturn, and both of them are past Saturn, which means they're going to expand their number of degrees separation until Mercury gets to a trine where the Sun is now, and the Sun, the next big aspect is going to be the opposition there. So let's go ahead and go forward in time. And I'm pretty sure we'll get Mercury with Saturn right there. So that shows around May 18th. So if we look, we see that May 17, May 18 right here is really in the middle of this sideways move here. So as far as this particular swing goes, we came close to it and we wouldn't have lost much in price. But if we watch for the Sun's relationship, we have quite a ways to go, and we see that Mercury actually speeds ahead of the Sun here and comes into its second relationship with Saturn in opposition here, and that's June 16th approximately. So if we look here, we find that June 14, 15, and 16 is very close to this area, but it's not precise. So that indicates that we would look for the market to quite possibly go higher. And we then have the Sun in opposition with Saturn, which was the next relationship we were waiting for with the Sun. That's June 27th. And that is right here. And again, we're not at a high, so we're anticipating that the market's going to continue higher, which obviously in hindsight, it continues significantly higher. So we're going to watch for the next relationship with Mercury, because that's going to happen, well, it's going to go retro, so let's see who gets where first. There's the trine with the Sun and Saturn, and also with Uranus right there. So that happens on August 26th, and that is right up here. So at this point, we see that we're at a big new high right here. We don't know that the market's going to go up like that. All we know is that we're at almost exactly this high right here. So that's a good indication that we could very easily be at the top right there. But again, we don't know for sure. And as we go forward, we get Mercury repeating the same aspect with these two planets right here, creating a grand trine. That's September 6, 2018. And if we look, that's right up here. So we're right by this top right here. And that's as good as we're going to get at this point in time. We don't know that it's the high. We know that we're higher than we were over here, right there. But we know that this is definitely a very good possibility. And then as we continue the relationships, we'll have the Sun and Mercury very close together in the square aspect with Saturn, which happens on September 22nd, September 23rd. We look over here, 22nd and 23rd right here. That shows us a bottom. So this shows us that we're either done and we've got the high, or we might go a little bit higher. So one of the main things you want to look for is if you're looking at a low or a high, you're expecting to get the opposite. Like we started with this low here. If the dates that you are calculating from these relationships with the planets land by highs, you have the potential of that being the end of the trend, quite obviously. But if that date lands by a low, it's indicating that it's either the trend has ended or you're going to continue with that trend after that particular low was made. So one of the things you need to understand is, while it looks really cool with something like we had this low right here and then we had the high right there, and you go, ooh, that's cool, that's awesome, that's exactly what I need. But then as you see it in practice, you see that there's a lot of problems with this system. Number one, if it's just that one relationship that you're looking at, like Sun and Jupiter right there, then there's a fairly decent possibility that you found the end of the trend. But when you get 2 or 3 or 4 relationships, there's a very good possibility you're not going to be able to figure it out until significantly after the fact. And all it's going to do is point to certain times for you. And then on top of that, you don't know which relationship, it might be the first relationship that shows up after what happened. Like we might have had a conjunction right there, and then the next relationship that shows up is a square, but that happens right here. And then the next one might be a trine, and that happens right here, and so forth and so on. So while at first glance it looks really good, in hindsight it leaves a lot to be desired. That's why I continue to develop this methodology into a more and more precise tool to use. So the more precision I'll go into, basically the new videos that I do on this particular subject matter, I'm going to introduce the evolution of what I did with this particular methodology, and so you can follow along with that. And as you see that, you can use that to help guide you in building your own methodologies and see how you might go about evolving what you're building and things of that nature. So hopefully it will be helpful in that way. Now if we continue, let's go forward a little bit. That 60-degree relationship right there we're not looking at. So what we're going to look at here is the fact that the Sun and Jupiter on November 25, 2018 are in a relationship again. Remember, it was a relationship between the Sun and Jupiter way down here, and we haven't passed this low yet. So we look for November 25, 2018, and we see that that's way over here at this particular low right there. But we were at a square originally, weren't we? And if we go back to a square relationship between the Sun and Jupiter, which is approximately August 6, 2018, we find that we're at a high here. So initially you might think, hey, wait a minute, there was a square over here at this low, and then the next relationship, which was a trine, there was a high. So now the Sun is all the way on the other side of Jupiter, entering a square relationship again. Maybe that's going to be the very end of the trend that's up here. And we see that on August 6th we got what looks like a high right there. But then, obviously, the market continues to move higher. So do you see how this is? It looks good, but then in actual practice, it's not as helpful as you might think initially. So anyway, that's the basics of this, of the original thing that I looked at and came up with, and it's nothing new. You've seen other people probably use something similar to this, but basically all you're doing is looking for a relationship at an important low or high. You're looking at it for a relationship between one of the 4 fast planets and one of the 4 slow planets. And if you find a relationship of the majors, meaning conjunction, opposition, trine, or square, then you wait for the next relationship in that group to happen and expect some sort of change in trend at that point in time, and hopefully it's of the opposite polarity. If you start with a low, then you get a high, and that might give you the high. Now, you can go ahead and expand on this yourself and start using it to start adding to it or looking at different aspects and things of that nature, and maybe you'll be able to figure out ways to improve it dramatically yourself, or you can just wait a week or two from now until the next video that I do, and it will tighten it up a little bit, I guess I could say. So until next time, this is hwsteele, and I will talk to you later.